The alarm screamed through the corridors of Colony Station Artemis like the wails of a dying beast. Red emergency lights painted everything in shades of blood and shadow. Massey pressed his palm against the cold metal wall, feeling the vibrations of destruction coursing through the station's skeleton. The Krevner assault had been swift and merciless, and now humanity's greatest achievement in the Andromeda sector was becoming their greatest tomb. Final evacuation pod. Someone screamed down the corridor. Last chance. Massey ran, his boots pounding against the deck plates. Around him, colonists scrambled in panic, some clutching children, others dragging injured loved ones. The station groaned, a terrible sound of buckling metal and failing life support systems. Through the viewport windows, he could see the Krevner warships, massive and terrible, their weapons turning the defensive fleet into expanding clouds of debris. He reached the evacuation bay just as the pod's warning klaxon began its final countdown. 20 seconds. The small craft could hold 15 people, and 14 had already crammed inside. Massey pushed forward, his survival instinct screaming at him to claim that last seat. Then he saw her. The alien girl sat huddled against the wall, her luminescent blue skin almost white with terror. She couldn't have been more than 16 in human years, her large violet eyes wide with fear. He'd seen her before in the science district, one of the Luminari refugees the station had taken in after the Krevner destroyed her homeworld. She was alone, trembling, her slender fingers pressed against her mouth. "Come on," Massey shouted, reaching for her hand. Annie looked up at him, confusion flickering across her delicate features. The Luminari were peaceful, telepathic beings, and Massey could almost feel her fear radiating through the air. 10 seconds. "I don't understand," she whispered in accented standard. "Why help me?" Massey didn't answer. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the pod. The pilot was screaming at them to hurry, one hand hovering over the door controls. Massey practically threw Annie through the opening, her light body sailing easily into the cramped space. "Wait," she cried, reaching back for him. 5 seconds. Massey looked at the pod, full to capacity with Annie's addition. Then he looked at the terrified faces inside, families, children, the survivors who still had a chance. His eyes met Annie's one last time, and he smiled. "Live well," he said softly, and slammed his fist on the external release. The door hissed shut. Annie's scream was cut off as the pod launched, rocketing away from the dying station. Massey watched it disappear into the star field, then turned and ran deeper into the station. Maybe there was another pod, another shuttle, another chance. Their WAS and single quotes. 8 years later, Massey sat in a rundown bar on Kepler Station, nursing a drink that tasted like recycled engine coolant. The war with the Krevner had ended 3 years ago, but the scars remained. Massey had survived barely. He'd been picked up by a patrol ship 2 days after Artemis fell, found drifting in an emergency beacon pod, more dead than alive. The years since had been hard. Reconstruction work, dead-end jobs, the constant weight of survivors' guilt. He barely remembered that alien girl anymore. Just another face in the chaos. The bar door opened, and Massey glanced up out of habit. His breath caught in his throat. Annie stood in the doorway. But this wasn't the terrified refugee girl from 8 years ago. This Annie wore the crisp white uniform of a Luminari diplomatic envoy, with golden insignia he didn't recognize marking her collar. She'd grown taller, more confident, her luminescent skin now glowing with health and purpose. Her violet eyes scanned the room until they locked onto his face. She walked straight to his table. "Massey Chen," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I've been looking for you for 3 years." Massey blinked, his mind struggling to connect the woman before him with the frightened girl from his memories. "Annie." She smiled, and it was like watching a star being born. "You remember. How did you survive? How are you here?" Annie pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "The pod made it to a Luminari rescue ship. They took us to New Lumina, the refugee settlement. I told them what you did, that a human gave his life so I could live." Her eyes glistened. "My people don't forget debts of honor, Massey, especially not ones paid in sacrifice." Massey shook his head. "It was just. Anyone would have done the same, but they didn't," and he said firmly. "You did, and that changed everything. She reached into her uniform and pulled out a data pad, sliding it across the table. Massey picked it up, his eyes widening as he read, "The Luminary Reconstruction Council." He read aloud, "Lead engineer position, new Artemis colony project." He looked up. "What is this?" "When I told my people your story, it spread," and he explained. "The human who sacrificed himself for an alien stranger. It became a symbol, Massey, a reminder that not all species are like the Krevner, that compassion exists beyond tribal boundaries." She leaned forward. "The Luminary Council used your story to lobby the Galactic Assembly for human aid. During the darkest days of the war, they argued that any species capable of producing individuals like you deserved to survive." Massey felt his throat tighten. "I didn't. I wasn't trying to be a hero. That's what made it matter," and he said softly, "You didn't hesitate. You didn't calculate. You just acted with pure, instinctive kindness." She gestured to the data pad. "New Artemis is a joint human luminary colony. We're rebuilding what was lost, together. And I convinced the council that the lead engineering position should go to you. If you'll take it." Massey stared at the data pad, then at Annie, 8 years ago. He'd given up his seat on an escape pod and expected to die. Instead, that single moment had rippled outward, touching lives and shaping history in ways he'd never imagined. "There's a ship leaving tomorrow." Annie continued, "I have a ticket with your name on it. Will you come home, Massey? Will you help us build something beautiful from the ashes?" Massey looked into those violet eyes, saw the hope and determination there, and felt something shift in his chest. The weight he'd carried for 8 years, the guilt, the aimlessness, the feeling that he'd survived for no reason began to lift. He smiled. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'll come home." Annie's face lit up with joy, her skin pulsing with soft light. She reached across the table and took his hand, and Massey felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the alcohol. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness echo across the stars, touching lives in ways we can never predict. Sometimes a single moment of selflessness can change the course of history. And sometimes, 8 years later, the girl you saved comes back to save you in return.